Hello, once again. This is Rob De La Estrella, the creator of the Blue Dragon Integrated Problem Solving System. And with me is my friend and associate, Dr. Bill Toth. He's our VP of Research and Development for Blue Dragon. And today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to simply have a conversation, if you will, about order from chaos. And it's a topic that is near and dear to Bill's heart. And it really encompasses so much of what we're doing here at Blue Dragon. And we thought we'd start with Bill introducing the topic itself, order from chaos. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, I'm not going to do a definition of order and chaos because I think for most people that's pretty obvious. You know, everybody experiences orderliness in their lives, and so everybody experiences chaos or chaotic forces in their lives. But what we want to do is talk a little bit about what the relationship is between order and chaos. There is obviously such a thing as an excess of chaos. And that's, everybody's felt that, whether it be in a personal circumstance or organizational circumstance, or even, if you happen to be from, a military background, you might have remembered, what people call the fog of war. It's just everything is going insane around you and there doesn't seem to be any order. Everybody's running every which way. I haven't had that experience, thankfully, but I've heard stories. So order is the opposite of that. Orderliness is beneficial in many cases. But what I wanted to point out is that we can often experience excesses at either extreme. We can have an excess of chaos, which is easy to understand, but we can also have an excess of order. So this sometimes can be a psychological condition. I can't remember who it was talking, but they said, have you ever gone over to somebody's house and all the furniture is covered in plastic?
I have.
Yeah. These people might be suffering from an excess of order. So an excess of order means that, processes are rigid. People are described as being set in their ways. That's another good way of describing an excess of order. So the idea here is that order and chaos are this interesting dance that, from chaos, we get creativity. From order, we tame the chaos and we can actually move forward. But generally speaking, when we're talking about organizational circumstances and the high consequence situations that we've analyzed using Blue Dragon, we're going to lean towards chaos being kind of the bad thing. So it's not, really philosophically, excess of either one is bad, but we're not going to tend towards worrying too much about the excess of order, because the thesis of this conversation and our premise here is that we've got too much chaos in our organizational circumstances, and Blue Dragon would be a good, rigorous methodology to help us bring us out of that chaos.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. And you reminded me of something. So I was in the military, but you know what? You don't have to go to war to understand chaos. You just have to have kids. If you have more than one kid, you're going to experience chaos. And when they outnumber the parents, that's when it really kicks in. So more than two kids, you're going to experience chaos firsthand. And funny enough, I can't believe you mentioned the plastic furniture. I grew up, and my best friend in high school, the Lacapolas, Mrs. Lacapola, was one of those that everything was in its place and all the furniture in the living room were covered in plastic. And for fun, I used to go into her kitchen and rearrange the pots and pans that were hanging neatly in a certain specific order from large to small. And just by doing that, I would throw her into a wild state of chaos where she was just wondering what the heck happened in her kitchen. Anyway, those are great.
Chaos for her is what you're saying, right?
Chaos for her.
Yeah.
But great topic. And as you said, Bill, Blue Dragon, it's an impressive process for bringing a terrific amount of order and discipline and structure to what is considered a very chaotic process, investigating some kind of a big issue, big problem. Because the number one thing that everyone tells me when they're trying to run some kind of a massive investigation, a very complicated investigation, is that they don't know quite where to start. They just start gathering information. It's coming at them from all directions. What are we doing with it all? And we provide a tremendous amount of order out of all that chaos. And Bill, why don't we pick something that both you and I are very comfortable with? I was a former nuclear site security manager. You were in nuclear nonproliferation and went to Russia 50 times to help them strengthen their security over there. So why don't we dig into that a little bit?
Sure. I think, and one more thing about chaos before we launch into the specific of the exercise. Chaos can be an opportunity for people to hide. For instance, and I've experienced this, and I don't want to get too cynical, but there are a lot of folks that will use chaos or that so-called fog of war to sell you the same thing twice, or it's in the benefit of some service provider to keep things chaotic, because when people are in chaos, they don't make rational and measured decisions. They're going to make quick decisions to, get me out of here as quickly as possible. They're going to make emotional kind of decisions. So I think that what we're also driving towards in this conversation is that if we begin to tame the chaos, or begin to bring order, we can make more measured decisions, design more elegant solutions, and ultimately save money, a lot of money. I would contend, not to get too political, but I would contend that the chaotic circumstances in our own government here in the United States is an opportunity for many, many different subcontractors to make tremendous amounts of money, and the taxpayer is paying for that. So wouldn't it be nice if we actually had some very clear intentions, some orderly processes that guided the expenditure of our scarce resources, precious resources, so that we actually achieved objectives and achieved goals in a timely and economical way. Wow. I can't
Yeah.
believe I said that out loud, but it sounds almost like, too Pollyanna, too much of a pipe dream. But,
No,
because
but
Rob
you're
and I both
absolutely
work
right.
in. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And I live in this government contracting world where the M&Os who are running our national laboratories, our nuclear weapons complex, and other Department of Energy sites, they're all contractors to the federal government. And believe me, first of all, they don't calculate the amount of overhead they're burning in dealing with the chaos. And by that, I mean there's a constant stream of recurring problems. They would rather put a Band-Aid on it, move on, and minimize the chaos a little bit and try to just get past it at the symptomatic level. But to really stop it requires a lot more discipline and organization, a lot more order. And that is not what I see. And you're right. They'll repeat problems year after year. And I'll give you this number. And 3 weeks ago, one of the national laboratories that I visited, we calculated the cost of recurring issues per year, and it was $32.6 million. And they had never done that calculation. They had no idea that they were burning that much money on overhead dealing with these recurring issues that keeps them in a certain state of chaos. So we have done the research, we have the numbers, and imagine the military and the chaos in the military that the contractors, the large firms that are defense contractors, are just using to their advantage. And I guess we can get into it a little bit deeper now, Bill. This is where we're going with this.
Yeah, so we were kind of kicking around this idea, and we're going to continue to explore this a little bit further. Let's talk about a fictional facility with high value assets. And that facility, let's say, part of the Blue Dragon process is what we call an inventory of systems. How many systems are pertinent here? But let's say in this facility, the high value assets, they've had some significant security problems. Assets, whatever they are, let's call them high value widgets, HVWs. And let's say those things have been stolen, and the customers lost confidence in the ability of that organization to keep these high value widgets, HVWs, intact, and they're thinking about actually moving the program somewhere else. So what sort of problems do we have here? To simplify it, just to kind of kick this idea around, and this is completely fictional, and we're just making this up as we go just to have a conversation. But let's say we've got 3 systems that we've identified. We've obviously have a security system because we have a security problem. Secondly, we have a production system, and because production of high-valued widgets is at least one foundational mission of this fictional facility. And lastly, we have a human resource system that we're going to look at, because human resource organizations are the ones responsible for the hiring, the management, and the firing of individuals. It's a facility, not a very large one. It's making high-valued widgets, and it's got security problems. And the security problems could be the cause of a loss of mission and moving the entire production to another facility. So, Rob, does that sound similar to things that you've seen in the past?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So right on target. And I do want to add this. And so if we could possibly create an equation that explains what's going on with the issues, if we had an equation to solve the problems caused by these 3 systems, the human resources, the security systems, and the production systems. In that equation, and picture a giant physics equation, if you will, a giant math equation, doesn't matter. I would insert this one little variable, and imagine a variable that has the shape of a little human stick figure. And the minute I inject a human as a variable into any equation, what do I get? I get infinite variability, and infinite variability equals chaos. And so because we have a lot of humans in these systems, in these equations, we have the potential for a lot of chaos. And that's exactly what's going on here, because from experience, we notice that the problems that we have the most trouble with and cause the most chaos are human-centered problems. Human-centered problems, especially in these modern working environments. We call them our modern socio-technical working environments, where it's a mix of the social issues and the technical issues that we are constantly surrounded with, and puts us in a high-pressure cooker situation. So just to round out that discussion, that humans are the infinite variable, and they cause a lot of complexity and a lot of chaos wherever we go.
Thanks for that. We're going to now talk a little bit more about the systems and break them into subsystems. So thanks for the addition on human resources. But in the human resources, we'll break down into two subsystems. One, they've got to hire and place guards that actually provide the security services. And then secondly, they have to hire and place the production workers that are actually making the high value widgets. The second, breaking the security systems down, and we can all kind of relate to this and see this, particularly with some of the things in the headlines today. We're talking about technical systems, tangible assets, things like guards, gates, and guns. That's the quip that people use to talk about a technical solution to a security problem. And then we have personnel and procedural issues that are directly related to security. Lastly, in the production systems, we'll focus on certain cultural issues that, in particular, this fight between security and production, so that management thinks that production is the main thing and that security is always a cost to be minimized. As a security person, I feel somewhat beat up by this attitude, because it was so difficult to actually get the attention of the production-oriented managers so that we could shut things down, do proper testing, do proper installations, and so forth. So there's always kind of a tension there, and that's somewhat of a cultural issue. And then finally, we'll talk about a kind of an artifact inside of the production, which is conduct of operations. Conduct of operations has an implication. It was born in the nuclear Navy, I think. Is that right, Rob?
Yes.
And it has at its foundation an almost over-applied intention of order. So we're going to it's the brute force order. So we're talking about a more elegant, orderly solution, the cognitive operations, where I think it had a tremendous amount of value. Again, on that order chaos spectrum, I think it could be overused. We're not talking about any focus on any one of these subsystems. We're talking about using Blue Dragon to look at each of these three systems we've identified critically, to identify their inherent weaknesses and fix them. And then, holding all three of these in mind, begin to design elegant solutions that take all of them into account and have an effect in all three areas. That's a really, really tall task. And it's only with a structured methodology that, like Blue Dragon, and we've talked about this before, that we can begin to separate the systems, look for their inherent weaknesses, and then start to put the systems back together in really elegant and complex ways, so that we can have mitigating efforts that begin to make them all harmonious and work together. So, Rob, just what are your impressions of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give you a sort of a big picture view of how we might do this, I do want to simplify it in this way. So each one of these, whether the resources and the hiring of the guards and the production workers and the security systems, both the technical side and the security personnel that have to follow a prescriptive set of requirements. And of course, same thing with the production and those processes, programs, processes, procedures, including conduct of operations. We can kind of group these things into a prescribed set of standards and expectations. And the way Blue Dragon works is we do our systems inventory and identify all of these systems, like the ones we're outlining here, and we lay those out on our chart. And then we go looking for specific performance. We look for performance in each of these areas. Performance evidence comes in many ways. It's the direct observation of human behaviors, and also all kinds of quantitative and qualitative information that we gather and bring in and analyze. So we compare performance against the standards and expectations, and we think like a doctor. We're going to be looking for the irregularities between the two, the deltas. Some call it a gap analysis. But let me answer this question. If a doctor takes in a new patient, the patient comes in and says they have a high fever, the doctor doesn't just put a cold compress on the forehead to calm down the high fever and says, go home, we took care of your high fever, because he knows that's only a symptom. Well, it's the same thing that's happening here in the real world, in our complex operating environments. We tend to look at the initial set of causal factors that are glaringly obvious, or a gap in performance, and we try to correct those and send people on their way saying, okay, we fixed a problem, when all they did was put a cold compress on the fever. They just addressed the symptom. They don't do enough of the in-depth analysis required to truly get at the deepest seated causes. And that's what we're doing here. We take a systems inventory, like Bill just described in detail for this particular fictitious scenario. Then we have a very rigorous process that really analyzes every aspect of those systems, and we call it 3D thinking. So we're looking how these systems interrelate, not in 2 dimensions, but in 3 dimensions. We also include time. So we have a temporal aspect to what we do. It could be a 4th dimension. So this very thorough, rigorous analysis is actually what it takes to solve complex problems, human-centric problems, particularly in our current very complicated working environments. And we make it a lot simpler to understand than you might expect. So Bill, I hope that was a good high-level overview of the approach that we take.
Yeah, and you reminded me in this. I remember on a personal note, I woke up one night in the middle of the night with severe abdominal pain, and it was really crippling. And I called into my doctor who was on call, and he prescribed painkillers, which I had such pain that I took them because it was the only relief I got. But he never really did any tests beyond that to find the cause of it. So needless to say, I wasn't with that doctor for very long.
Amazing.
And I survived the abdominal pain anyway. So never really got a diagnosis either.
Yeah.
So Rob, you did a couple of points that you brought up that are good segues back into this kind of the exercise that we're proposing, or the fictional facility that's making high value widgets. One is exactly right. If they don't have specific understanding of the processes making the high value widgets, then the hire may or may not be appropriate. So, just because they have guard force or security expert next to their name doesn't mean they're going to be well suited for the particular production objectives of this particular facility. So that's worth watching. So that's one of the looking inside the human resource system at the subsystems to see if we've got inherent weaknesses in the way we're actually hiring people. Secondly, getting into the subsystems related to the security systems, and we're watching this happen and play out in school violence and so many different arenas, is that if we put in technical systems, we begin to really restrict the flow of people. And then here we're talking a little bit about the excess of order idea. So anyway, security systems over applied, particularly technical systems, listening and watching and controlling can actually bring in some of that excess of order, which is unacceptable to the culture and may actually drive that third aspect in the production system, the cultural wedge between production and security, even wider. So, we had these ideas about security. Now they've come along with draconian solutions. I can't even move. I can't get my product out the door because I'm constantly doing security checks or inventories or the like. And now I hate it even more. And so what we're looking for are elegant solutions that are accepted by everyone. So going through the list again, human resources. Human resources has to have a proven track record of hiring the right people. And if they can't find the right people, instituting training programs so they can give the specific training for that production mission that actually puts the right people on the floor. And same thing applies to the security personnel, as Rob has pointed out. So as you can see, what we're doing here is almost looping through these three systems to see elegant solutions or elegant identification of problems that offer opportunities for solutions that are elegant enough to deal with all three. Interestingly, Robin, you can comment on this better than anyone. I'm asking questions like, are they hiring the right kind of guards? Are they hiring the right? Are they putting the right technical systems in? Or the technical systems restricting movement? These sound a whole lot like lines of inquiry, or the beginnings of lines of inquiry on a typical Blue Dragon, right?
Absolutely correct. And of course, our lines of inquiry, the more focused they can be, the more focused on the symptoms that are ailing, the gaps in performance that are ailing a particular organization, the closer or the faster we're going to get to their underlying causes by asking those kinds of questions. So it's important to ask these questions, but targeted at performance gaps, because as I say in class, in our training, gaps in performance are nothing more than the breadcrumbs that the deeper seated issues are allowing us to see. So anytime we have a problem or an event, the immediate set of causal factors that are identified, the ones that are on the surface, the ones that are we call often low-hanging fruit, those are the initial gaps in performance that are merely symptomatic of the deeper seated issues. And our job is to, through a rigorous analysis, which is what Blue Dragon does, reverse engineer our way back from these high-level gaps in performance / symptoms back down to their deepest seated sources, their points of origin, the deep-seated, traditionally latent organizational weaknesses and cultural weaknesses that are at the bottom of our cause and effect sequences. And they are the start and the major contributors to all this chaos. The chaos is caused by unseen, deep-seated, latent organizational and cultural weaknesses that no one is doing sufficient in-depth analysis to get to. And I want to really tee off on something you said, Bill, because this is one of our nation's biggest points of contention or arguments, I would say. And that is, what do we do with school shootings? And most folks are trying to apply a cold compress to the forehead of someone with high fever. And that's all that's all they're willing to do. They would like to solve this problem by hardening our school, by simply putting more walls, more fences, more alarms, maybe more armed guards around every school, every elementary school, middle school, high school. Can you imagine? While at the same time, without the lack of understanding that humans will find a way to bypass all of that. Humans will find a way to get past all of those defenses and have another school shooting, no matter how much money we spend. Because what we have not done is solve the real issue. And those real issues, what's actually at the heart of these school shootings, is not because we didn't have enough fences around the schools. They're much more complex than that. And they are human-centric, latent weaknesses that we haven't really uncovered. And these weaknesses are truly wicked problems that we have in society. I don't know of anything that's been done so far, even with specialist groups, including PhDs and others, that they've ever done the proper depth of analysis with the right methodology to really solve this kind of problem. We would love to tackle that, right? Right, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think about this school shooting problem all the time and really worry about the hardening of schools from this perspective. As you're right, Rob, things can be overcome. People lose focus. So if you're talking about resource officers, school RSOs, I've met a lot of them that are really wonderful people that engage with the students. I also, know that there's some out there that aren't very good. So if you create essentially a killing box, lock all the kids in the school, and have a resource officer that's overcome by the shooter. Now you've got everybody trapped. I mean, one of the best things, absolutely, in response to a mass shooting, is for everybody to run. I mean, all of the data shows that, so our basic assumption about how we save our lives in a hurricane is duck and cover. In a mass shooting event, it's different. It's run, scatter, get out of there. And if we're putting fences and hardening schools, how much restriction are we putting in people's way so that they can't do the thing that's going to save their lives? So I'm really concerned about that aspect. Anyway, we could go a long time on school shooting.
We can.
Yeah.
I would rather not see a back door to every classroom, that every classroom has at least 2 escape routes as opposed to more fences. And who's to say that the resource officer isn't the one that becomes the shooter. You just failed all your defenses by making the resource officer the shooter. So where there's humans involved, infinite possibilities.
So we're asking, how does a human resource solution affect production? How does the security solution affect production? And how do production cultural aspects affect security and so forth? So we're looking at inter, which is inside of those small systems, and then we're intra, taking all three systems into account. This is why we're talking about how complex it can be. Almost, I'm envisioning like a three-dimensional key, trying to get things to fit together. This is why we talk about three-dimensional thinking. But if we come up with this, and I think the Blue Dragon gives us the best opportunity to come up with these elegant solutions, it's a thing of beauty, an absolute thing of beauty. When you implement a solution that's been rigorously thought through in this way, and then you begin to see not only improvements in security, improvements in worker attitude, improvements in productivity, improvements in production and profitability. It's almost moving to watch how wonderful that can be. And that's what is the energy that drives the things that Rob and I find important, and why we push this methodology as hard as we do. Rob?
Because at the heart of it all, once you really understand how to do complex problem solving and solving some of these wicked problems, you'll see that they take us down to the depths of an organization. And the deepest aspect of an organization is their culture. And these are deep cultural issues within a system. And if you take that and extrapolate it out, within society. And those kind of issues are rarely, if ever, identified in discussions. But we have. In fact, Bill and I worked on something recently where we were looking at secrets that were leaking out at a certain rate from one of our secure facilities, the kind of information that the Chinese and the Russians are mining so they can use against us to neutralize our nuclear weapons program. That's how much of a threat this information was. And we were, this organization or this site was allowing these leaks to occur and couldn't stop it. So we were brought in to analyze this. And we did. And at the heart of it all was the culture for that particular functional area that was allowing these leaks to take place was not mature enough. And the senior team, when they sat with us at the end of our analysis, they're the ones who put the culture word on the board. They're the ones that realized that we don't have the right culture here. We don't have the right emphasis on what the culture should look like, should be, in order for us not to have these kind of problems. And those are difficult because what is a culture? It is the product of the behaviors of the people inside that system over, and this is where the time comes in, over a period of time. So a culture is how people behave over a period of time. And if you can think of it that way in those straightforward terms, you understand that to change the culture, you have to change the way that people behave. And that takes a lot of influencing people's values and beliefs, and that can take time. That's why you hear that cultural changes can take a long time, and that is very true. And I've done several of these in my career at a nuclear site, at a Department of Energy site, and they can be done. You got to start by understanding that you do have a cultural issue, and not many methodologies or systems out there can ever hope to go that deep. In fact, they stop too soon. They stop at the event causes of the problem. They never go to the real deepest-seated causes. Only Blue Dragon is really built and designed to always go that deep.
Yeah, so this has been a great discussion. I think bringing it back around to the original opening message and the opening idea of bringing order out of chaos. And again, we are tending towards saying that chaos is bad in organizational circumstances. That the deeper conversation is not always bad, but that gets to creativity and other aspects we won't talk about today. But let's just say we tend towards it being bad. What we're looking for are elegant solutions, because again, going back to an earlier part of the conversation, we can come up with non-elegant solutions. We can come up with clunky solutions that will actually add to the chaos. So we don't want to do that. We want to look for solutions that begin to harmonize multiple systems at the same time. So And we've touched on a few of these in the subsystems on the fictional facility that we've been discussing, but we can all think of ways that we can find and design, use our imaginations, use our analytical capabilities to come up with solutions that help multiple systems simultaneously. Of course, there's give and take all the while. I mean, everything in the order sense, we can have absolute secure facilities, but nobody goes in and nobody goes out. They're going to be our high value assets are going to be locked up in some sort of enormous vault that nobody can access. Well, that completely blows away production, and that's an excess of order, which is unacceptable. At the same time, if we want maximum movement and freedom of our production personnel, then security suffers. So we have to think about these things in such a way that we optimize and maximize the benefit to all systems at once. It's not easy, but we feel like the methodology that we're proposing will actually lead us as close to that solution or closer to that solution than anything else.
Absolutely. Blue Dragon brings order to the chaotic processes of our wicked and complex problems. Without a doubt. We've experienced it, and Bill and I have seen it work extremely effectively. Well, that about wraps us up, Bill. Thank you so much. This is a great topic. I love what you put on the table here. And I do want to encourage our viewers to go look at some of our other topics that we have out there on our YouTube training channel. We have great topics all focused on improving your organization, organizational excellence topics. For example, we talk about organizational resiliency and the organizational shadows that management teams don't like to look under. We talk about cleaning up organizational clutter and other things like gray rhino events, very predictable, preventable events, but organizations really aren't prepared to prevent gray rhino events. So all that and more, we encourage you to watch some of our other content, and we'll see you next time. Bill, last words?
No, it's been a great conversation. I hope that we can include some others and maybe some panel members and keep this going. So thanks, Rob.
All right. Thank you all. See you next time.